Okay, guys, we're going to get started here with Unit 8, um, Lesson 6, Independent and Dependent Variables. Now, this can get tricky here, so you really need to follow along and do this guided practice with me so that you understand the concepts here. So I think we're pretty good shape. You can be able to see this. But anyway, an independent variable can stand by itself. If something's dependent, all right, it needs something else for it to stand. So the dependent variable is dependent upon the independent variable. And that's kind of hard to understand, but let's go ahead and get started. The independent variable is the fixed or the constants. Okay, it stands alone. It will never change. It can be represented by the x coordinate. All right, and we're going to be doing some graphing with that. And this sometimes is called the control. Okay, I don't usually use that term, but that's what they want plugged in there, control. The dependent variable is the responsive or dependent on the independent variable. And you're going to see how all this fits together in these samples down here. But it can be represented by the y coordinate and always changes, always. Okay, so we're going to be doing some graphing later, but right now let's go ahead and get set up. Let me pull that up there just a little bit, check it out. Yeah, we're in good shape. Okay, so Jameson runs M miles and burns C number of calories. Okay, so what stands alone? What stands alone in this case is the number, all right, of miles. Okay, what is dependent upon the number of miles is the calories burned. Okay, now think about that for a second. The more miles I run, the more calories I burn. I can't burn calories without running miles. The more hours H Brady practices, the better his test grade G will be. Independent is the number of hours, right? So the more hours you practice, the better test grade, right, you're going to get. So this is usually dependent on this, unless you're a genius, but the more hours you study, the higher the test grade. Let's come down to Michael. Michael pays $8.99 a month for his Netflix subscription. Okay, so independent would be the number, all right, of months. What is dependent upon that? The total cost, right? So if you're paying $8.99 a month, 1 month, number of months is that? 2 months times 2 times 3 for 3 and so on, right? All right, this is an interesting one, number 4. A car travels 60 miles an hour, okay? Well, what stands alone in this case, all right, is the number of, hours, all right? So the longer you drive at this rate, the more total miles you're going to get. Okay, so this is dependent upon the number of miles or number of hours, that you drive. Each bag of popcorn costs $6 at the football game. $6. What stands alone? Bags of popcorn. Right? What is dependent upon that? The total cost. The more popcorn I buy, the more money it is. If I don't buy any popcorn, I have no total cost. Think of it that way. Number 6, the later Jessie stays up at night, the sleepier she is at school. Interesting, right? All right, so what is independent? What stands by itself? Well, the number of hours of sleep, right? Number of hours of sleep. And I'm starting to abbreviate a little bit more. What is dependent upon that? Right? How tired you are. More sleep, not as tired. Less sleep, more tired. Think about that, okay? So again, one thing stands by itself. The dependent variable, all right, is dependent upon the independent, how much of that or how little of that you have. Let's flip over and take a look at the top of the next page. Let me see if I'm okay with that. Yep, I'm in good shape. And let's rock and roll. Okay, graphs and tables can display independent quantities. Okay. So list the independent variables. All right. So we talked about that on the previous page. Independent variable is always the X. The X is left and right. So it's the number of weeks. List the dependent variable. Well, that's the Y, isn't it? Remember, this was X and this was Y. It's the total pounds lost. So total pounds lost. That's an abbreviation. Okay, so now we're going to be particular. We're going to list the quantities of the independent. Remember, the independent's the X. This was the Y. So we're going to look across this. And what are we looking for? We're just looking for these numbers here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 10, right? List the dependent variables. Now look at the interval there. It's a little bit different. The interval counts by 3. So it's 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, and I'm just going to dot it up to 30, right? So you understand that. So X is independent, Y is dependent. We can't have total pounds lost without the number of weeks on the plan. Think about that. These are the quantities. The quantities are the intervals going across the horizontal axis, and these are the quantities on the y-axis. Let's continue on. Let me make sure you can see that, okay? Because this is important. This is new stuff. Okay, so next up, label the independent and dependent variables from each table. Okay, so on a table from previous lesson, we should remember that this is X and this is Y, all right? So the independent is the number of pounds. The dependent is total weight. The independent is the X variable. That's the first one in the column, right? Unless they label it differently, hours. All right, so it's hours and then miles. Independent, all right? Number of months. Dependent, total cost. Right? Let's continue on. You're kind of getting the idea. X, number of minutes, is our independent variable. But wait a second. They don't want us to list these labels. Label the independent and dependent variable quantities. Quantities. So the quantities are the numbers, the intervals. So let's take a look at this here, okay? So we have 3, 6, 9, and 12. We got to read the directions. Over here, 165, 330, 495, and 660. Okay, let's continue on. X, independent, hours, 1, 2, 3, 4, 0.75, 1.5, 2.25, and then 3. X is independent, 4, 8, 12, 16. The quantities of the Y are 14, 28, 42, and 56. So again, one more time, and let's pull this back here just a little bit. X is independent, Y is dependent. We can't have Y without X. We can't have the total number of pounds lost without the number of weeks. Okay, guys, jump into the homework.